Now go. Another day in Israel, another terror attack on the day of recording this show. I'm Barry Shaw. This is The View from Israel. And today, my guest is Michelle Lubin Terris, who is the founder and president of JEXIT USA. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Barry, and thank you so much for your support and what you do to help get the message across the world as to how important Israel is to the world.
We can't do it on our own over here. We need organizations like your JEXIT. A pity there aren't more JEXITs in America, in different places in America, but we really appreciate your support. So Michelle, tell us, what was the moment, what was the inspiration for you to actually create JEXIT? Explain to our viewers what JEXIT is and what it does, what it stands for.
Thank you. In 2018, a group of Jewish American women, myself and some friends, attended the Supervisor of Elections protests in Fort Lauderdale. And we literally saw before our very eyes the election attempting to be stolen. And we were supporters of Governor Ron DeSantis. We protested for about 8 days, morning till night. We found ballot ties snipped in the parking lot. We saw trucks coming in, and we literally made national news, and everybody just converged into the Fort Lauderdale area, and we forced a recount. And actually, the Jewish vote was the vote that tipped the scale in favor of Governor Ron DeSantis. They did a hand recount. We were able to bring attention to this issue, and luckily we have Governor DeSantis versus Governor Gillum, which would have been absolutely disastrous. At that time, I was getting calls from, I literally got a call from Hannity. You know who Sean Hannity is. We felt so empowered by the ability to literally stop a steal. We felt that knowing that there was a Lexit and a Blexit and a Brexit, we said, we got to do something about the squad. So we planned a rally on Capitol Hill. It lasted 5 hours. Breitbart filmed the whole thing, and the rest was history. I incorporated. We're a 501c4 educational organization, not for profit, and we began to get the word out about what was going on. At the time, it was the resolution HR 183 that got watered down, of course. Barry, we were talking earlier this morning about how Jewish causes tend to get watered down by the jihad perspectives, right? And we stood on Capitol Hill. We were very empowered. We got tremendous support, and the rest is history. Here we are today, continuing the movement and the work involved.
In Israel, you brought a delegation both of JEXIT, but together with Tom Trento and United West, with one or two fairly well-known people, non-Jews, on a tour of a very special tour of Israel. This wasn't a tourism tour. This had a lot more significance behind it. Tell us about your visit to Israel.
Well, first of all, I don't know if you're aware, you know what happened in Surfside here with the collapse of the building in Surfside. I just want to bring this up, that Israel is generally the first, if not one of the only First Nations that shows up in support of others around the world during times of need. And we were able to help, JEXIT was able to help the IDF. We turned our organization into a fundraising machine to help the IDF once they got here at the scene of the collapse of the building. And we brought to light how important Israel is to the rest of the world and how important Israel is to national security. They're our national security partner. They're preeminent in national security. And the fire department here, all of the local agencies, they were so impressed with how Israel helped identify the bodies, where the bodies were located in the rescue and research for that disaster, that was such a highlight to our whole area here. And I just wanted to mention that it was an incredible experience, and it's so important that we show the rest of the world and showcase Israel, because again, Israel's our national security partner, and they are always on the scene wherever disaster strikes throughout the world. Now, we brought our delegation with the United West, and we invited the former ICE director, Tom Homan, and national security experts like Sarah Carter, who works on the border. And they came to Israel with us to look at how Israel protects their sovereignty and how they've solved their immigration problem. And we were able to work with General Alon Friedman. I don't know if you know him. We worked with Colonel Danny Terza. We visited Ami Shaked at the Karim Shalom crossing. He's the director there. And we went to the northern border, the southern border, and the eastern borders, and we got a tremendous education. It was overwhelming, actually. We had national security clearance to go into one of the 6 tunnels up in the Golan. The world can't even imagine. That tunnel took 5 years to build. This tunnel was incredible. I mean, electricity. It was so sophisticated that the money spent and the lives lost, the lives lost for the people that literally want to kill Jews and harm Israel, it was mind-boggling. We went 45 meters down, which was halfway, and it was an experience that I can't even describe. It was, if they spent the money and time and manpower to build Walmarts in their communities and to build infrastructure to help people and their communities and to thrive, they would be, they would have everything that they need, these people. But right now, Lebanon barely has any water. So you see that these terrorist organizations are well funded, and they are hell-bent on destroying Israeli lives and Jews. And I know that Sarah and Tom were amazed at the level of manpower and the level of what it takes to literally defend civilian lives in Israel and what they're facing. It's heartbreaking, actually. It's heartbreaking. And the world needs to know the truth.
Well, as you rightly explained, any country that doesn't protect its border really ends up without a state. And what I see going on in America right now, where I understand the number of illegal migrants flowing and flooding into the United States has gone beyond 7.5 million. I think, and you have no idea who these people are. You don't know what criminals are in. You certainly don't know what terrorists are coming in, because people are coming all over the world to walk across the southern border, unvetted, uncontrolled by the current administration. This has to stop. All you have to do is look around Europe and see what's been happening in European countries that have allowed unbridled migration into their countries. All of them are suffering. All of them recently, but far too late, have decided to get rid of their socialist leftist governments and turn to the right. And those include, for instance, the most recent examples of Sweden and also Italy. but it's going to happen in other countries as well. As you're seeing the riots and the going on in Paris and parts of France right now, these riots are being instigated and carried out by people not traditional French citizens. This is a fate that's going to happen in the United States unless other approach is made. But relating to Israel, we do have our problems, and they are connected with borders, because what we've been experiencing is the start of an amalgam of terrorism that's coming together across our northern border, across our southern border, and across our eastern border, and even within what should be parts of Israel, Judea and Samaria. We're getting the unbridled rise of terrorism infrastructure in some of the major towns that we released to the Palestinian Authority as part of the Oslo Accord as a gesture for peace. We did it with the Gaza Strip, which is now totally controlled and occupied by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. We did it with a lot of other Arab towns, which we gave over to the Palestinian authorities, including towns like Jenin, where the IDF had to go in hardcore a few days ago in order to root out the total infrastructure of terrorism that is going on in that town, or has been going on in that town, to the extent that we found that even the mosque from which Palestinian gunmen were shooting on IDF soldiers, we had to storm the mosque, to kill or arrest the terrorists. And what we found in the mosque, it had become an armed weapon fortress with underground tunnels in a mosque. And this has been done by Islamic terrorists. This is how they revere their own religion and their own mosques. If they don't revere their own mosque that way, how can they have any respect for anything Jewish in the land? And this is the problem we're having, because the time will come, if Israel doesn't stay on top of this, on control of this, we will be attacked simultaneously by rockets and terrorists coming over our borders from the south, from Gaza, from the north with Hezbollah in Lebanon, from the east coming in from Syria, and even from the towns that should be under the control of the Palestinian Authority, but are today in the control of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. This will be the time where Iran, in Tehran, give them the green light to attack simultaneously. Yeah. This is one of the dangers. I don't know if that was explained to you, Michelle, during your visit, but this is what we're facing today. This is what we just saw in Jenin.
Well, I'll tell you what the general told us as we were overlooking the Lebanese border. He said there's 150,000 missiles pointed at us, and the next intifada is imminent, and we will be in the bomb shelters for 2 months, our citizens, and it won't be a very pretty sight in Israel. But when you just mentioned Jenin, let's talk about the BBC. What did the BBC say? Read that article that you just read earlier. Yeah.
Yes, what Michelle was referring to here is, and I put it on my social media outlets, including Facebook, Twitter, etc. The BBC, a lady at the BBC Talking Head was interviewing Naftali Bennett, a former prime minister, over the necessary incursion of IDF into Jenin, and virtually accused him of sending in Israeli soldiers in order to kill Palestinian children, because one or two of those killed were 16 and 70 years old. And she wouldn't hear the protest of Naftali Bennett saying, these are armed terrorists. No, they're our children. And this relates to something I'm going to address shortly when I want to talk to you about something that's going on in America. Because one of the things I'm finding right now in America and in Israel and reporting on around the world, particularly in America, is the change in policy and the change in attitude and the change of approach that has been taking place in America since Biden came into the White House, replaced Trump, President Trump, who was one of the most pro-Israel presidents, the most pro-Israel president since Harry Truman. I'd like you to address that particular problem you're finding in America right now as it applies to Jews and applies to the attitude of this administration against Israel.
Well, for one, the Biden administration continues to elevate anti-Israel administration. Look at the Squad, for instance. Thomas Nides, the ambassador. I pulled up an article today. The ambassadors to Israel approved grant aimed at delegitimizing Israel. So what are we supposed to do? And then we have our Jewish American voter bloc that 74% vote for the Democrat Party that's totally abandoned Jews in Israel.
I want to have JEXIT become one of the instruments of JEXIT is to inform the Jewish community in America about the dangerous swing against Israel, which is a dangerous swing against Jews. We have an administration in America with an anti-Israel hardcore, an administration with a dangerous Israeli policies that has been undermining the current elected government. And it's the president who has frozen out the Israeli prime minister. Benjamin Netanyahu has been elected now for 7 months and he hasn't yet received an invitation to the White House. Yep. I think this is very significant.
It's a disgrace, and that should tell you everything that you need to know. And Barry, I really feel now, after coming back from Israel, that JEXIT has an obligation and a responsibility to lead delegations to Israel yearly. This is the way in which we can have more transparency, and the truth is, you bring people there, they tell people, so on and so forth. One of our ambassadors, one of our JEXIT ambassadors, was telling me a story yesterday about a South African group that experienced apartheid. I don't know if you heard about this. They took them to Israel, never said a word about anything, let them experience Israel. And when they went back to Israel, they shared the truth. You can't go to Israel and not see the truth. It's there for you to see. You don't even have to explain anything. Based on how people live and how you're received and the safety that you feel just being there and understanding the threat of terrorism, there's nothing like going to Israel and people and having a greater understanding, going to Yad Vashem, going to the holy sites. That is, I think, the best way to stop and fight anti-Semitism in modern day.
I can tell you that one or two of the pastors I've had the pleasure and honor of meet, including those from South Africa. Thomas, Kenneth Misho was a member of the South African Parliament. Almost Tom Thamanga is another one. The Christian pastors in Africa, particularly even in South Africa, are very pro-Israel. I think also that JEXIT would gain greatly by having you, Michelle, make contact with Dumisani Washington, who has created the Black Solidarity Movement with Israel. I think him and his congregations, together with JEXIT and other affirmative Jewish organizations, would be a very powerful bloc against the rising left in America right now.
I agree with you. I'm fully committed, and I appreciate your support. But you know so many of these people, and then I think we all really need to unite. That's the key. We've got to, as Jews, unite with the Christian community. Again, we Jews and Christians are the last guardians of Western civilization, and we have it. We have the 10 Commandments in our DNA. We share the same God. We have to get back to these principles, the Judeo-Christian principles that our country was founded upon, because the Marxist threat is literally to remove God from the public square. And we're seeing it happen now, like we discussed yesterday with the LGBTQ community, the sexualization of the children. One thing that really impressed us is the traditional values that Israel still has. The children are protected, and we're facing tremendous assault on parental rights, and the assault on the family and the children. It's getting to the point where we're literally living in like a Sodom and Gomorrah era on steroids, Barry. And that's another thing that we should highlight about Israel. We talked about the traditional values that they still have, and the morals, the moral compass that our country has lost. The Democrat Party, I put up a post the other day, is literally a direct assault against God.
On this score, one of the things I could do is to inform you and have you inform other people in America of some of the dangerous things that are happening with this administration when it comes not only to Israel but to Jews. And I want to highlight one point. The Biden administration has adopted what they call a national strategy to combat anti-Semitism. Now, on its face, this is very positive and needs to be done. But I want to let you know some of the things they talk about in this national strategy to counter anti-Semitism and some of the things that it doesn't. And this would appeal to any Jews in America who are watching this show right now. Let me tell you that, for instance, that there is a internationally recognized definition of anti-Semitism, which includes Israel. Any criticism or attacks on Israel exclusively that does not apply to any other country anywhere in the world is down as anti-Semitism, but not according to this new definition of the Biden administration's national new strategy on combat anti-Semitism. Let me just read out a few things that we've extracted. For instance, in the document of this, the word Zionism doesn't appear at all, but the acronym LGBTQI+ appears 7 times. Gender appears 7 times. Equity appears 10 times, and Islamophobia appears 21 times. Now you begin to see by the definition of what goes in this document that this has nothing to do with actually fighting anti-Semitism and strictly helping Jews in America to fight anti-Semitism at a time when the biggest hate crime in America is against Jews. And yet the Biden administration has allowed in, believe it or not, CARE to be a member of this national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. I'll leave you, Michelle, to describe to our viewers who CARE is in America.
CARE has been designated a terrorist organization everywhere except America. How's that? And
right. Also goes out with very strong anti-Semitic programs and speakers.
And one of the things that we need to highlight is that Jewish funding, our Jewish American dollars, are funding our own demise. Back during the BLM riots, Jews were putting up the BLM signs all over their social media supporting BLM, but they don't really know where their money goes. Their money was going to Act Blue, which is to fund the Democrat Party. And all of these organizations that they're funding are rooted in anti-Semitism, like CRT, Antifa, the BLM. They don't know where their money is going, and they don't realize that they're funding their own demise. That's the key thing, is we've got to educate them and they've got to follow the money and see where their money is actually going.
Well, part of this national policy, Biden national policy to counter anti-Semitism was an adoption of what's called the Nexus document. The Nexus document actually one which says that prescribes that criticism and actions against Israel must not be and cannot be called anti-Semitic. And they do this because they are in the Palestinian cause, and a lot of them strongly, including CARE, strongly stand behind the cause of a Palestine from the river to the sea. And anybody objecting to that can be called an anti-Semite. And part of this is what we discussed before with regard to even like the BBC cannot see that they are actively spouting anti-Semitism, where the Israeli army, at the demand of the public, after Israel has been hit by a wave of anti-Semitism, and I'm speaking to you today, just hours after another Jew has been killed by a Palestinian gunman, to go into the centers of Palestinian terrorism and clean them out. And yet they say, for instance, that as we discussed before, when the BBC accuse top Israeli politicians and anybody else and say, you're going in and killing Palestinian children, as if no Palestinian children, unarmed, or anybody, civilians, were killed in the operation in Jenin, non-zero. Every person had been killed, had been an armed terrorist, yes, including 16 and 17-year-old, which tells you more about Palestinian education than it does about Israeli education or security. Yeah, so it's very important, Michelle, that JEXIT and other people put out the information, the facts and the information that we can send you from Israel and inform people, particularly Jews, because as your title says, it's times for Jews to JEXIT a political organization which is increasingly anti-Israel and is appeasing to a lot of Israeli enemies.
100%. When we started JEXIT, we used to say it's time for Jews to JEXIT the Democrat Party. But let's face it, let's be honest, the Democrat Party has abandoned the Jews. So the Jews have to recognize this, and they have to stop supporting these organizations that are rooted, as I said, in anti-Semitism, that are designed to harm Jews and Israel.
You know, I'm reminding myself here, Michelle, of many years ago when Jeremy Corbyn was in charge of the British Labour Party and on his way to becoming Prime Minister. And he unleashed not only the most egregious anti-Israel policies, but also anti-Semitic policies among his rank and file members, branch members, and even members of Parliament, that it became a headline in Britain. Brexit came about of two reasons. One, because the normal people in England wanted to stop the unbridled invasion of illegal migrants into the country. That was one. But this was being enabled by socialist local governments and also the British Labour Party, which was anti-Semitic. And what happened was that a number of members of Parliament, Christians to begin with, walked away from the party. They were members of Parliament, it's basically saying in the Senate, and they had been there, many for 20, 30 years, and yet they gave up their seat in the British Parliament because they couldn't stand the anti-Semitism of the Labour Party within their midst. I think we're getting to a point in America where this could be coming to a head. And it does seem to me, and I may be because I'm distant from you in the States, that the anti-Israel, anti-Semitism that is taking root among the left is being helped and perpetrated by quite a number of the Jewish religious organizations in America who seem to be in the camp of the woke, progressive, critical race theory, DEA, universal values, and walked away from their core Judaism. What do you say about that?
Well, I read to you some statistics earlier. They've lost their identity. And the number one question we get asked most is, why did Jews vote left? But before I go into that, I want to ask you a question. The general that we met with said to us that American tax dollars are funding the terrorists. How do the Israelis not have tremendous resentment toward us? How do they go on every day? I shared with you about this Kareem Shalom director that we met, and how they are on the border of the Gaza and Israeli border, and they send humanitarian aid, and they continue to face attacks from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And they've witnessed rocket fire, suicide attacks, and they still are facilitating humanitarian aid to the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, bringing truckloads in, scanning the truckloads, and trying to help their economy, hiring the Palestinians that come in come in every day, and then they provide these shipments to Judea and Samaria to try to help the Palestinians living there. But it's so counterproductive. I want to understand, how do you not have resentment toward America?
If we had an administration in America who came down hard on the Palestinian Authority and said, you have to change your attitude, you have to change your incitement against Jews, you have to change this narration you've got if you want a Palestinian state from the river to the sea. In other words, a Palestine in which there is no Israel anywhere. And what we want would be leadership, really also from outside of Israel, but from the United States, and yes, from the Europeans as well, in order to come down on the Palestinian Authority and said, while you still exist, you have to change your attitude. If you want prosperity to your people, you have to tell them, we want to make you a prosperous, peaceful nation, and work alongside Israel to make this happen. They have never done that, never done that. And this is something that the Biden administration is refusing to do and will not do. It may be one of the reasons why, for instance, that out of sheer frustration, our Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is heading next month in August to Beijing to meet President Xi of China, because I think he's given up when it comes to modifying issues here in the region, given up the ghost with regard to the Biden administration. I don't think he trusts them when it comes to dealing properly with the Palestinians. He certainly doesn't trust them when it comes to dealing with the Iranians. I'll give you another statistic, which I don't believe any of your members of JEXIT or most people watching our show right now know this. But the Biden administration, and I hope you're sitting down, Michelle, the Biden administration has decided to stop scientific and technological cooperation with Israel within the Jewish entities in Judea and Samaria and the Golan, which the Biden administration refers to as also Jerusalem, which it calls East Jerusalem, as if it doesn't belong to Israel at all. So basically what the Biden administration has started to do is listen to the radical left in the Democrat Party and begun to impose a boycott, academic and scientific boycotts on Israel right now. You didn't know this is existing, but it's existing. Look it up, and I will send to anybody watching the show wants the information. I will send it to them. The current Biden administration is boycotting U.S.-Israel cooperation with institutes like the Ariel University, a science and technological hub that serves both Jews and Arabs alike. Places that the Biden administration has called arm in arm with the BDS movement is now defining that it doesn't belong to Israel. And this goes back, by the way, to the what year was it? The forgot, the United Nations resolution 2334. This was the notion put forward by both Obama and Biden in order to declare any part of Israel which goes beyond the 1967 border is occupied Palestinian territory. And part of that is where you went, inside the old city of Jerusalem, is, according to the Biden-Obama US Resolution 2334, occupied Palestinian territory, where the Temple Mount, where the Wailing Wall is, within the old city, the Mouth of Olives, Jewish cemetery, occupied Palestinian territory. So now they're letting out at places like Ariel University and stopping any cooperation, scientific cooperation, which would give universal benefits not only to the Jews and Arabs living in the area, but the world and the Middle East generally.
This is 1938 you're describing.
Scary.
It's very
But the situation
scary.
is getting worse because the Biden administration wants to again make up with the Iranians and try and pass another nuclear agreement. Nothing is going to stop the Iranians from advancing to a nuclear missile. Nothing is going to stop it. The only way it's going to be stopped will have to be by Israel and Israel alone, unless, of course, this is something that perhaps Benjamin Netanyahu could persuade President Xi of China to do what President Biden of the United States is not doing. And that is to get a firm commitment, as far as any commitment can be made with the Iranians, the mad mullahs in Iran, not to develop a nuclear missile.
It's devastating. It's heartbreaking. And again, that's why we're working with Christian organizations, because our Jewish brothers and sisters, they've lost their identity, and their ideology is their religion. And I shared with you before we started that the number one question that we get asked most is, why do Jews vote left? And the answer is very disheartening. Most Jews vote left because they don't care about Judaism or Israel. They care about secular leftism, and again, which I stated, is their religion. And I shared with you earlier some of the polls. I don't know if you want me to go on and share them with your viewers, but
Go ahead.
Only 41% say that their religion is important to them in their daily life. Only 34% said that they attend religious services at least monthly. 22% of Jews say they have no religion. And just 38% of Jews say that their Jewish identity has anything to do with religion at all. Just 10% of Jews identify as Orthodox, which are people that observe the commandments in daily life. And as for Israel, this is just unbelievable. Just 30% of Jews say they are very attached to Israel. Only 43% of Jews have ever been to Israel. And just 40% of Jews believe God gave Israel to the Jewish people. 27% say that God didn't. 28% said that they didn't believe in God at all. So we ask, what does being Jewish mean to most Jews? According to the Pew poll, 73% of Jews said it was about remembering the Holocaust, and just 19% said it was about observing Jewish law. So Jews, as we discussed, in other words, are not religious. They are secular leftists who don't want to be labeled white. And most Jews don't know, and at worst, they don't care about commandments, Torah lifestyle. We discussed that. So it shouldn't be surprising that they tend to vote left. The the Torah in modern parlance is conservative, and it doesn't believe in a grand welfare system, but in private charity, and it dictates that we Jews have a responsibility to live ethically according to a set of specific behavioral guidelines. Judaism, as I said, is conservative in the modern parlance, and while Jews vote 3-1 for Democrats, Orthodox Jews vote nearly 2-1 for Republicans. We also discussed that the Democrat Party is not the party of JFK any longer, and they're not even the party of the Clintons. Instead, the modern Democrat Party is so left-leaning that things 10 years ago that would have been seen as bipartisan or something that we can find some common ground in have been labeled bigoted. The intersectional coalition of the victimhood, gender pronoun obsession, and abortion until birth, and every other hard push to the left across the spectrum has made it a different party than 20 years ago, and certainly 50 or 60 years ago, Barry. We still find that older Jews vote leftist because they remember the legacy of the European Christianity that preyed on Jews for centuries, but they don't realize, which is one of the things that we are educating these people on, is that the American Christians are Jews' best friends, not the American left. We see this every day when they support us and they call us and they want to join our organization to help to expose this false news about Israel being an apartheid state and all the other garbage that the media is spewing. So ideologically, the Torah is much more in line with conservative values. Our country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles that are rooted in Torah. And we say that it's time for the Jewish community to wake up, embrace their faith a bit more, and in doing so, leave those false perspectives touted by the American left behind.
Well said. And the viewers, if you've been impressed or moved by anything you've seen in this show today, and you want to fight for traditional Judeo-Christian values in America or anywhere else for that matter, contact me here in Israel or contact Michelle at JEXIT. If you want the fight for the right of Israel to exist and Israelis to live securely and safely and peacefully in their country, contact me and contact Michelle. It's time for us to roll up our sleeves and do something to set back a lot of the rotten, degrading policies that are taking place around Israel, but also sadly within the United States. It's time to you to stand up and be counted. Thank you for joining me. This is Barry Shaw, The View from Israel.
אנו מכריזים בזאת